The Springboks escaped from Argentina with a victory, but this was far from the kind of performance that sends a warning to the All Blacks. In fact, if anything, the result may have raised more questions than answers. South Africa won 17-10, but they were pushed to the limit by an Argentina side that refused to give them space, rhythm, or comfort. It was not beautiful rugby. It was not dominant rugby. It was survival rugby. And yet, perhaps that is exactly why Rassie Erasmus will take something valuable from this difficult afternoon. From the opening whistle, the Pumas made it clear that the world champions would have to fight for every meter. Their defense was aggressive, fast, and relentless, constantly disrupting the Springboks and preventing their attack from finding any real rhythm. For long periods, South Africa looked uncomfortable, and their attacking game struggled to produce the explosive moments fans have come to expect. Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu, one of the young players carrying enormous expectations, found himself under serious pressure as Santiago Carreras appeared to win the battle between the two playmakers. Argentina also found success by challenging South Africa around the set piece, with the inexperienced Springboks props facing problems against a determined Pumas pack. Meanwhile, Pablo Matera, wearing the captain's armband for Argentina, produced a powerful performance that showed exactly why experience still matters in high-pressure test rugby. Even Cameron Haincombe, impressive in his first start at number 8, had to work extremely hard against Matera's physical presence. But then came the moment that changed the entire emotional landscape of the match. South Africa lost captain Siya Kolisi to injury, creating an anxious moment for the Springboks and their supporters. Kolisi's leadership has become one of the defining elements of this South African team, and seeing him leave the field immediately raised concerns, especially with the massive 4-test series against the All Blacks approaching. Rassie Erasmus later attempted to ease those fears, explaining that Kolisi had suffered a hamstring problem but suggesting that the injury did not appear too serious. Still, with the biggest rivalry in world rugby approaching, every injury creates questions. And this is where the bigger story begins. Because despite everything that went wrong, the Springboks found a way to win. They did not overwhelm Argentina. They did not control every phase. They did not produce a performance that will be remembered as one of their greatest. But they stayed composed when the match became uncomfortable, and they kept fighting when the pressure increased. That character may ultimately prove more valuable than a comfortable victory. Rassie Erasmus admitted that his team was not satisfied with the performance itself, but he praised the mentality of his players. Several members of the starting team had not played for around 8 months, while South Africa were also missing a large number of their frontline players. In total, the circumstances were far from ideal. This was not simply a normal test match. It was a difficult examination of South Africa's depth. 5 players in the starting 15 were returning after a long period away from international rugby, and many of the experienced stars were unavailable. Yet somehow, the Springboks managed to hold their nerve. And then came the final seconds. Argentina had one last opportunity to completely change the story. Matias Moroni found himself close to the try line with the chance to bring the Pumas back into the contest for a moment. It looked as though South Africa's hard work might collapse at the final hurdle. But the ball was dropped, the opportunity disappeared, and the emotional weight of the moment became overwhelming. Moroni was visibly devastated, while the Springboks could finally breathe. It was the kind of ending that summed up the entire match. South Africa had not been perfect. They had not been convincing. But they had survived. And survival is sometimes the most important skill in international rugby. For the All Blacks, however, there is no reason to panic just yet. New Zealand will look at this performance and see weaknesses they can potentially exploit. South Africa's attack was not flowing. Their young players were under pressure. Their set piece was tested. Their playmaking lacked consistency. And with the enormous physical demands of 4 consecutive tests, those weaknesses could become even more important. But there is another side to the story. The All Blacks should also remember that the team they are preparing to face was nowhere near full strength. The Springboks were managing injuries, rustiness, rotation, and a brutal schedule. Players such as Eben Etzebeth and Lud de Jager were getting valuable minutes after long periods away, while younger players were being thrown into the intensity of Test rugby. This was not the finished version of the Springboks. It was a team being assembled, tested, and sharpened before the biggest challenge of the season. And that is why this victory could be more useful than it looks. A comfortable win might have hidden problems. This difficult match exposed them. Rassie Erasmus now knows exactly where his side needs to improve. He knows which players can handle pressure. He knows where the combinations are still developing. And most importantly, he knows his team can win even when the rugby is ugly. That is a dangerous quality to possess. The greatest teams are not judged only by the matches in which everything goes according to plan. They are judged by what happens when the plan falls apart. Against Argentina, the Springboks were forced into survival mode, and they survived. The next challenge will be dramatically different. The All Blacks bring their own attacking threats, their own pace, their own pressure, and perhaps most importantly, the emotional intensity of one of rugby's greatest rivalries. There will be no room for hesitation. There will be no easy moments. Every mistake will be punished, and every possession will matter. New Zealand will undoubtedly study this Argentina match carefully. They will look at the areas where South Africa struggled and search for ways to apply even greater pressure. But the Springboks will be studying themselves too. They will know that a 17-10 victory is not enough to satisfy them. They will know their attack must become sharper, their execution cleaner, and their discipline stronger. They will also know that players returning from long layoffs now have valuable test minutes under their belts. That could make a huge difference when the rivalry with the All Blacks begins. So, should New Zealand worry after South Africa escaped Argentina? Probably not because of the performance itself. But perhaps they should pay attention to the mentality behind it. The Springboks were far from their best, yet they still walked away with the result. They were challenged, disrupted, and pushed to the edge, but they refused to break. That is the kind of resilience that can become extremely dangerous when a team finally finds its rhythm. The message from Argentina is therefore simple. The Springboks are not finished. They are still building. This was not a masterpiece, and nobody in the South African camp will pretend that it was. But it was a hard lesson, a valuable victory, and another step toward the enormous battle waiting against the All Blacks. And when those two giants finally meet, South Africa will need much more than survival. They will need precision, power, composure, and courage. The question is no longer whether the Springboks can win ugly. They have already shown that they can. The real question is what happens when this team finally puts everything together. Because if South Africa can turn the lessons from this difficult victory into a complete performance, the All Blacks may discover that the team they are about to face is far more dangerous than the one that struggled against Argentina.